They called her name, not mine. The applause was deafening, somewhere between triumphant and reverent. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the screen behind the podium as her face filled it bright and polished under the soft lighting of the Atlantic Research Conference in Boston. For her groundbreaking framework on ethical AI implementation, the announcer read, "We are honored to present this year's Emerging Visionary Award to Dr. Cecilia Vance." I didn't hear the rest. My ears rang, my hands went cold. I should have stood up, walked out, said something. Instead, I just sat there, still, silent, swallowed whole. She took the stage in the same navy suit she wore when we rehearsed her keynote in my apartment 3 nights ago. I remember how she laughed then, tossing her head back wine in one hand, the other tugging at the hem of her blazer like a nervous tick. What if they hated she had asked? What if I had smiled at her? I had stayed up until 3 a.m. that night running mock Q&As, fixing her transitions, refining the phrasing. I had printed a second copy of the research brief mine with my annotations and references clearly marked. I had put it on her desk with a post-it that said, "Just in case." Now she was holding that same brief in her hands as she accepted the award. My brief, my framework, my theory. She never said my name, not once. There was no co-author, no collaborator, no thank you to my research partner of 4 years. Just her radiant and calm, standing on the shoulders of work that wasn't entirely hers. And I couldn't move. It felt like betrayal should come with fire, screaming, accusations hurled across conference tables, maybe even a dramatic storm out with eyes red and heels clicking like gunfire. But this wasn't fire. This was frost, a stillness that crept up the back of my neck and settled at the base of my skull. I sat in that stiff auditorium chair with my badge tucked under my coat, and my breath shallow, and my hands gripping the notebook I didn't need anymore. When she finished, the audience rose to its feet. Everyone around me was clapping, some with tears in their eyes. I looked down at the name on my badge, Dr. Meredith Hale. The tag was slightly bent, the plastic peeling at the edge. It looked small, insignificant, like a footnote in someone else's story. She walked past me as she left the stage. Her eyes swept the room, but she didn't pause on me, didn't even glance. It was as if I'd been erased, not wronged, just deleted. I stood up quietly and walked out before the next speaker began. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just needed air. My throat burned like I'd swallowed something sharp and unforgiving. Outside, the night had fallen hard. The sky over Boston was deep gray, pressed low, and the breeze off the harbor smelled of salt and coming rain. I leaned against the side of the conference center and let the wind hit me square in the chest. I wasn't humiliated. I was hollow. There's a difference, you know. Humiliation demands witnesses. But this was private. This was personal. This was a quiet unmaking. People always ask how betrayal feels. Like fire, they think. Like rage. But sometimes it's the absence of everything. A vanishing act. A name unsaid. A silence that stings worse than any scream. That night, I didn't call anyone. Not my parents. Not my colleagues back at the Institute. Not even Olivia, my roommate and best friend from undergrad, who would have flown across the country just to rage on my behalf. I just went back to my hotel, peeled off the dress I'd worn, thinking I might get recognized too, and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. She knew what she was doing, that was the thing. Cecilia wasn't careless, she was strategic, intentional. She didn't forget to name me, she chose not to. I didn't scream, I didn't demand credit. Not that night. But something inside me shifted quiet and certain. I didn't know how or when, but I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Not for me. Cecilia wasn't always like that. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't see it. That's the thing about trust, you hand it over piece by piece, never noticing how much of yourself you've given away, until there's nothing left in your grip. We met freshman year at Stanford. She was magnetic in the way that made professors remember her name after one class. I was quieter, better with numbers, than people more comfortable organizing chaos than standing in front of it. She always joked that I was the brain and she was the voice. You build the engine, she'd say, and I'll drive the damn car. And I believed her. We studied late into the night, shared terrible dorm coffee, and worse breakups applied to the same internships took turns proofreading each other's work. Somewhere along the way, our ambitions braided together. Grad school came, and we chose the same program. I gave up Berkeley to follow her to Cambridge, thinking we were a team. People called us the twins. Same major, same laugh, same goals. But only one of us was used to being seen. I never minded staying in the background. It felt safe, honest. I liked structure, process, invisible victories. Cecilia liked the spotlight, and I liked watching her shine. That balance worked until it didn't. Looking back, I can trace the start of the unraveling to our final year of grad school. We were both working on a joint thesis project that combined my technical framework on ethical constraints in machine learning with her behavioral modeling theories. It was a solid partnership until she started presenting the ideas on her own at smaller panels. At first, it was small things. She would say my team instead of we. She'd use first-person singular when explaining our methods. I let it go. I told myself it didn't matter, that we knew the truth. When I got sick during the spring symposium, I asked her to go in my place, just to read the paper we'd written. Of course, she said, you're the core of it anyway. I'm just the messenger. She didn't just read it, she revised it, removed the co-authorship note, branded it under her name entirely. When I confronted her later, she brushed it off. It was just a small panel. No one important was there. I didn't think you'd mind, and I didn't push. That was the moment I could have drawn a line. Said no, demanded something, but I didn't, because I thought friends didn't need to be reminded what fairness looked like. After graduation, she got hired by the Horizon Foundation, our dream employer. I stayed behind to complete postdoc work and teach. I told myself it was temporary, that our paths would realign, that we were still in this together. But I kept seeing our work show up in her articles. She'd reference ongoing research without saying where it came from. Phrases we'd coined together appeared in her papers. And yet, every time we caught up quick coffee calls emails. With sorry for the delay in the subject line, she made it seem like everything was normal. I owe so much of what I've learned to you, she told me once, voice soft over the phone. As I stood in my cold kitchen at midnight grading essays, you're still the smartest person I know. It felt like a compliment, but now I wonder if it was a cover. Because what she really meant was, as long as I keep flattering you, maybe you won't notice I'm stealing from you. And for a while I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to believe it. There's something almost romantic about betrayal when it's done slowly. You cling to the good moments, replay every inside joke, every secret shared, every deadline pulled all-nighter, and you think, no, she couldn't do that. She wouldn't. But she did. And the worst part isn't that she used my work. It's that I helped her do it. I gave her access to my drafts. I opened every folder. I invited her into my process. I thought I was building something with a friend. Turns out I was building a ladder. And when it was tall enough, she climbed it without looking back. So no, Boston wasn't the first time she erased me. It was just the first time I saw it clearly. After the conference in Boston, I flew home in silence. No anger, no tears, just a cold kind of quiet that settled into my bones and refused to leave. People think betrayal is loud shattering, but this was more like erosion, a slow wearing away, of something I didn't realize I was still clinging to. I returned to my small apartment in Cambridge, the same one I'd lived in during postdoc. My name was still on the door. My books still lined the shelves, but the air felt thinner, like I'd been gone longer than I thought. For days, I didn't touch my research. I didn't check my inbox. I didn't speak her name. Instead, I watched. It started with curiosity, or maybe just habit. I searched the Horizon Foundation's online archive, looked through their keynote replays, public statements, op-eds. Each time Cecilia appeared, I took notes not out of obsession, but precision. I was collecting patterns, the vocabulary she used, the diagrams, even her sentence structures. They weren't hers, not originally. They were mine iterations I'd drafted over 4 years of work, refined late into the night, tested against case studies taught in class. She'd changed a word here, added a new example there, but the skeleton was the same. She had stolen the body and dressed it in new clothes. And yet she was being hailed as revolutionary. I found myself watching one panel discussion she gave on conscious coding at the Montreal Summit. She spoke with ease, confidence, humor. When asked how she developed her framework, she smiled and said, "It came from years of working alone in small spaces, trying to find language for things no one else was seeing yet." I paused the video. I knew that room. I had worked in it too. She didn't just rewrite our story, she edited me out. For a while, I tried convincing myself it didn't matter, that the work had been done regardless of whose name it sat under, that the research would move the field forward, that my ego shouldn't matter. But ego wasn't the problem. Silence was. She was building a future off the back of someone else's labor, and shaping a narrative where I'd never existed. And I'd been complicit, time and time again, in making myself smaller so she could seem larger. I didn't confront her, not then, not yet. Instead, I started backing up my old files, organizing drafts, cross-referencing dates. Not out of spite, but protection. I had journals, timestamps, early versions of white papers, recorded Zoom calls with shared screens. Even annotated PDFs we'd marked up together. It wasn't revenge, it was documentation. I knew enough about her ambition to know she wouldn't stop. The conferences would grow bigger, the claims bolder. And if I stayed quiet, it wouldn't just be my work that vanished. It would be my name, my credibility, my place in a field I had helped shape. One afternoon, I received a newsletter from the Global Ethics and AI Institute announcing their upcoming panel on innovation and intellectual ownership. Featured guest speaker, Dr. Cecilia Vance. I stared at the screen for a long time. She was going to speak on ownership of ideas, and I realized she thought I would never speak, because I never had, and that was her mistake. She assumed my silence was surrender, but it was never that. It was restraint, deliberate, controlled, temporary. The night before the global ethics panel, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I just couldn't stop thinking. Cecilia was about to step on stage again to discuss intellectual ownership in emerging research. It was poetic in a way. She would speak eloquently as always about originality, citation, authorship. Words she had learned from me, ideas built from the bones of my work. And not a soul in that room would know what it cost her to get there. No one except me. That morning I dressed plainly, black slacks, slate blouse, hair pulled back. No name tag, no makeup. I didn't go to be seen. I went to see. The panel was held at a sleek, glass-sided conference center overlooking the river. I sat near the back notebook on my lap pen still capped. I already knew what I needed to write. Cecilia took the stage to applause, poised and polished her voice steady as she launched into her keynote, The Ethics of Attribution in Collaborative Spaces. I listened not as a peer, but as a historian, someone who already knew the ending to the story being spun. She spoke of shared labor, of collective thought, of transparency. And then she said it. When we work in community, she said, her hand resting lightly on the podium, we must ensure all voices are lifted, that no one's contribution is lost in the noise of ambition. The room nodded, murmurs of approval. I sat still, heart quiet, because that was it. That was the moment I knew without question that she had rewritten our past so thoroughly she had started to believe it herself. This wasn't a lie she told to manipulate others. It had become a script she performed so often she forgot where it began. And that more than the theft was the real betrayal. She had erased me so completely that even she no longer remembered I was there. I left before the Q&A, before anyone could recognize me, before I said something I'd regret. Back at home, I opened the Dropbox archive I hadn't touched in months. Folder after folder, drafts, transcripts, memos, versions labeled MHV 1.3 and MH Final Reel this time. I found the original white paper we'd co-authored, dated 2 years earlier than her groundbreaking framework. I pulled up an email thread where I outlined the core theory, the one now bearing her name, on international journals. I opened my notebook and made a list. Not of what she took, but of what I still had. The timeline was clear, the citations were traceable. The evidence was cold. Not emotional, not speculative, verifiable. That same night, I scheduled a call with Dr. Lin, the deputy editor at Future Ethics Quarterly. We'd spoken before briefly at an event in Toronto, and she had always been generous with young researchers. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply asked a question. If a submission contains unattributed content that can be traced to prior unpublished work, I said, what's the best process for documenting that? Dr. Lin didn't ask for names. She didn't have to. She sent me their protocol. Clear, clean, no drama, just data. I spent the next 3 days compiling it all. The documents, the timestamps, the emails. I didn't frame it as sabotage. I presented it as what it was, a matter of academic integrity. No rage, no flame wars, no cryptic tweets, just a quiet door opening in a system built on record keeping. 1 week later, I received a brief, polite email from the journal. We've opened an inquiry. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. It was signed simply Dr. Lin. No promises, no spectacle, but that was fine. Because this wasn't about spectacle, it was about beginning. The inquiry went silent for a while. At first, I told myself that was normal. Bureaucracies move slowly. Peer reviews take time. Due process isn't dramatic. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. Something heavier. Something colder. People started pulling back. Not obviously, no confrontation. Just quiet absences where connection used to be. A colleague I'd mentored for 2 years suddenly stopped replying to my emails. A panel I was invited to speak on got restructured without explanation. A junior editor from a journal I'd written for unfollowed me overnight, digital vanishing small but sharp. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. I was becoming the problem. Not because I was wrong, but because I broke the unspoken rule. I spoke. Academia likes to pretend it values integrity, but more than anything, it values order. And I had disrupted it by questioning someone already perched on the pedestal. Cecilia, of course, remained untouchable. She kept speaking, kept publishing. She even gave an interview to Wired titled The Future of Fairness. In it, she talked about radical transparency and how young women in STEM should support one another unconditionally. She didn't mention me. She didn't need to. The implication was enough. I was now the cautionary tale, the jealous one, the bitter footnote. And yet, I didn't respond. I didn't leak anything. I didn't call her out. I didn't even clarify. Not because I was afraid, but because I was watching who disappeared. I was paying attention to the silence. I learned a lot in those weeks. Who checked in and who didn't. Who offered help and who offered distance. The truth is, I was never part of the club. Not really. I was useful, smart, quiet. But I was never someone they bet on. Cecilia was the safe face of innovation, charming, press-ready, palatable. I was the scaffolding, invisible once the building was complete. So I stopped trying to be invited back in. I went back to my old work teaching research coding in coffee shops. I started mentoring 2 students who reminded me of the version of myself. I used to be curious, sharp, but unsure if their voice belonged in the room. I didn't tell them what was happening. I just showed up, consistently, quietly. And then 3 weeks after the Wired article dropped, I got a message. Not from a peer, not from an editor, from a student. A first-year doctoral candidate at NYU who had seen Cecilia speak. She wrote, "Hi, Dr. Hale. I hope this isn't inappropriate. I'm reaching out because I recognized a section of Dr. Vance's framework from something you once published in a guest lecture packet. You probably know this already, but I just wanted you to know I saw it, and I see you." It was unsigned, anonymous email, probably created just to send that one message. But I read it 3 times, then again, and something in me shifted. Because for all the people who turned away, there were still some, maybe just a few, who looked closer. I printed the email, folded it, tucked it into the back of my notebook. It didn't fix anything. It didn't restore my reputation. But it reminded me that truth doesn't vanish just because people pretend not to see it. It waits, patient, quiet, and when the moment comes, it cuts clean. I didn't announce my return. No posts, no statements, no dramatic declarations of war. I simply logged in. I went back to the internal servers at the Center for Tech Ethics, where I still had limited research access. It was something most people forgot, that adjuncts, even the quiet ones, still had keys to a lot of old doors. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for proof. In a private folder, one we had shared years ago under both our initials, I found the original upload of our joint research notes unedited. Metadata intact, every edit traceable, every timestamp aligned. My annotations, my citations, even our early audio notes recorded over scratchy Zoom calls with our dogs barking in the background. And then one audio clip in particular caught me off guard. She was laughing. God, I never would have gotten through the ethics section without you. That's your brain entirely. I sat still for a long time after that. It was so casual, so unfiltered, so honest, said in the way you only speak when you don't think anyone will ever need the evidence. But I kept the file. Meanwhile, the inquiry at Future Ethics Quarterly had quietly closed. They never released a public statement, but I received a brief email from Dr. Lin. We have decided to withdraw Dr. Vance's article from our citation database pending further review. This is a confidential matter. Thank you for your diligence. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated. I just saved the email into a clean folder marked Integrity. That same week, something else shifted. An editor from the European Journal of Applied AI, someone I barely knew, reached out privately. She asked if I had any unpublished work on ethical framework modeling. I hesitated for a moment. Then I replied with 2 papers, one older one revised, my name alone, no shared authorship, no traces of anyone else. They accepted both within a week. I didn't tell anyone, but slowly the silence began to thin. A student at MIT cited my old work in her thesis defense. A small AI accountability blog quoted a paragraph I'd forgotten I wrote. Then came the invitation from the same international research consortium that once featured Cecilia. They wanted me to join their advisory board, not as a guest, as a mentor. I reread the message twice. It was short, direct, professional. We believe your voice is critical to the future of AI ethics. Your work has endured. Would you consider lending your guidance as we restructure our mentorship committee? They didn't mention Cecilia. They didn't need to. I said yes, not because I needed the title, but because I knew what I would do with it. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't retaliate. I would rebuild the very ladder she had climbed, but this time I would make sure no one got to the top by standing on someone else's back. That was my comeback, not a takedown, a redesign. Because I no longer cared about punishing her, I cared about protecting the ones like me, the ones too quiet to be heard, the ones she thought no one would notice. It didn't happen all at once. The undoing was gradual, quiet, clinical. It started with a journal retraction, just a line added quietly on the site. This article has been removed due to questions regarding authorship and attribution. No fanfare, no dramatic exposé, just a footnote, but one that spread. The Horizon Foundation removed Cecilia's profile from their speaker page. Then the committee she co-chaired for the AI Transparency Accord quietly rotated leadership. Her name disappeared from the upcoming panels. Her fellowship talks were postponed indefinitely, and no one ever said why. They didn't need to. In this world, silence is a sentence. I watched from a distance. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a single message. People who once praised her began hedging. I always felt something was off about her work, one colleague said on a call, not realizing I was on the line. Another professor referenced my 2018 framework in a keynote and never mentioned her name at all. She wasn't blacklisted. She was erased, the same way she had erased me. And just like that, balance returned, not with noise, but with precision. Then came the final twist, an invitation-only summit in Geneva. The International Ethics Advisory Board was launching its first mentorship arm, selecting 5 senior advisors to shape the direction of global tech ethics education. The chairwoman, Dr. Amal Rowe, had followed my work quietly for years. She introduced me on the first day with simple words. Our final selection is someone whose commitment to integrity has shaped a generation of emerging thinkers, not always in the spotlight, but always at the foundation. I walked to the stage without fanfare. No cameras, no applause. Just that calm surgical silence of a system realigning itself one hinge at a time. After the panel, someone handed me a small black binder. Inside were the preliminary mentor assignments. One name caught my eye, a graduate student from Cecilia's old lab. Apparently, she had withdrawn her application to stay under Dr. Vance's supervision and asked to be reassigned. Under notes, someone had written in pencil, requested Meredith Hale instead. I closed the binder slowly, and that was it. No revenge, no headline, just a new name written where mine used to be missing. This wasn't justice in the way people imagine. It wasn't a courtroom win or a public reckoning. It was quieter than that, sharper, and somehow far more permanent, because she had built a story on borrowed foundations. And now that foundation had shifted. Without needing to shout, I had made it clear I was never gone. I was just waiting. I didn't post about it. No humble brag, no profile update, no triumphant caption saying full circle. I just went home. The Geneva summit ended on a Thursday. I flew back that night, slept through most of the flight, and returned to a quiet apartment where the mail had piled up and the fridge held nothing but oat milk and a lemon too stubborn to rot. It felt exactly right. The next morning I brewed coffee, watered the plants, and opened my laptop not to chase anything but just to write. Not for an audience, just for myself. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped waiting for recognition and started remembering who I was before I handed my voice to someone else. I still teach twice a week. A seminar on accountability in emerging tech and a workshop on authorship ethics. Students don't always know what I've been through. Some only know me from a footnote or an old journal citation. But a few stay after class to ask quiet questions. How do you protect your work? What do you do when someone takes credit for your ideas? I never give them bitter answers. I just teach them how to leave a paper trail that doesn't bleed. Cecilia never reached out. I didn't expect her to. People like her don't apologize. They reinvent, relocate, reframe. But she'll never rebuild what she lost. Not because I punished her, but because now the room no longer forgets to ask whose voice is missing, and that, in the end, is enough. Some days I still feel the urge to disappear, to shrink the way I used to when praise made me uncomfortable. But I've learned how to hold space without explanation. I don't need to be loud to exist. I don't need to be remembered by everyone, just by the right ones. There's a student now, Jasmine, who reminds me of myself at 23. She speaks softly, but writes like her bones are on fire. She once emailed me a research brief at 2:17 a.m., saying, "I hope this isn't too much." It wasn't. It was brilliant. I'm teaching her how to protect her work, how to be generous without being erased. And when I watch her walk into a room, now I see her spine a little straighter. Her silence no longer confused with absence. And maybe that's the best ending I could ask for. Not applause, not revenge. Just the quiet certainty that I am no longer invisible. And neither are the women who come after me.